It's interesting because we were talking about it, my wife and I were like, how many people do you think are going to be? Maybe 10 would be good. Great job, everybody. So, we're going to discuss many things. One thing maybe you've realized is, have you ever noticed just how charismatic some people may be? They have just this personality about them that when they enter the room, they command all sorts of attention. All eyes are on them in a positive way. Everyone enjoys their presence. But then there's other people. You know, other people. There's those people that bore you, that are so dull, that have no rhythm to their voice. And it doesn't matter what they say. They could be telling you the meaning of life, and you'd rather just fall asleep. Well, there's many ways you can act, and let me introduce myself. I am Grant Offenberger. That's me right there, so I can prove it to you. I'm Grant Offenberger. And I do many things, but I run Grant Peace, a hypnotherapy-centered solution to helping you live the best life you possibly want. In addition to my hypnotherapy practice, I also go around and help people with all sorts of issues they may have in life, business, relationship, and confidence, as well as helping you tell better stories. Because whether you're a comic book writer, whether you're a novelist, a filmmaker, a professional wrestler, whether you're a musician, whether you're just a TikToker, or whether you're just coming home and talking to your spouse about your day, you're always a storyteller. Everyone is a storyteller. And a storyteller is simply a salesman of emotions. That's all you are as a storyteller. You're selling someone emotions, because if they don't feel anything from your story, they're not going to care. You have to feel something. You're feeling humor right now, maybe. And so you're invested in what I'm saying right now. And the whole job as a storyteller is to sell emotions. But why are you selling them emotions? Because you need them to take action. It's your call to action. Whether you need them to buy the next issue, watch the next episode, buy the next record, come back the next week, you need them to take action. You need to be next step obsessed. What is the next goal? By telling this story, what's the domino effect for the next one? There's always a process to it. You're selling action through emotions. In one way that you get people to take action, they get them invested emotionally, is through a cliffhanger. They want to find out what happens next. That's always been a popular one. And a cliffhanger is simply just one example of a hypnotic technique known as an open loop, where you start something and you don't quite finish it. You move on to the next thing, and then the person is so interested in what you say, maybe not even consciously, maybe subconsciously, that they're focused because they're wondering where that goes. Maybe you've talked to someone and they're about to tell you a story and it gets sidetracked and you're like, yes, but what was the first thing? What was the important thing you were going to tell me? Well, they created an open loop. They haven't finished the whole circle. And so a cliffhanger is one way to do it. I've been to a wrestling show that started off as a magic act. A fight broke out before they showed the right card, and the whole 3 hours of the show went on until the very end when someone spit out the card. It was genius. It was an open loop. I wasn't even focused on the card anymore. I had forgotten, but it kept my attention that entire time. And if you want to keep someone's attention, you have to figure out how much are they going to pay attention in the first place before they're emotionally invested. Because people are typically only able to consciously pay attention to 7 plus or minus 2 things. That's a really dumb way of saying 5 to 9. 7 plus or minus 2 is as much as you're typically consciously aware of. You look at billboards, most good billboards, most advertisement has 5 to 9 words, because anymore you're just gonna fade it out, you're not going to remember it. So one good way is to keep your message as concise as possible. Use the least amount of communication with the most amount of meaning, because the conscious mind can only take so much. The rest is subconscious, and if they're not invested, they're not going to care about what else you have to sell them, what actions you want them to take. And when you're using these words, when you're trying to engage your audience, it's important to use small words, in fact, because most people, the average American, is at a grade 7 reading level. I love our PowerPoint. And so, because the average American reads at a grade 7 reading level, you can certainly use bigger words, but the more advanced words you use, the more you're just going to alienate your potential audience. I mean, look at political figures, look at anyone in media. Trump knows big words. He purposely uses the smaller words because he's a salesman and he knows how to create emotion out of you. People that know how to use emotions and how to manipulate the subconscious mind in favor, maybe in a good way or a bad way, it doesn't matter. They know that you use smaller words because you can attract a bigger audience. And one way of attracting them with these small words is to make sure you have a lot of descriptors, adjectives, adverbs, anything that describes the subject you're talking about because it paints a mental image in their mind. It creates an idea, because if you're just telling them something, they don't have this fantasy within them. But if you give them some adjectives, some adverbs, some descriptors, they can kind of paint out the picture, they can put themselves there. And it's also about the order that you place everything. Like, if I tell you, oh, there was a camel that was blue, and it had 6 legs. You originally had the idea of a camel, and then you had to reframe it to be blue, and then you had to reframe it again, and it had 6 legs. It's messy, you won't pay attention because it's using too much mental energy. But if I told you there was a blue 6-legged camel, you didn't have the image yet until I told you what the subject was. And so it's important to use the descriptors to describe what you're talking about beforehand. And a good way is to use, this is like a little cheat, is I use 2 descriptors on the subject I'm talking about and 1 more descriptor. You can easily and effortlessly hear everything I'm saying, and those are the 2 descriptors beforehand, and then you just use 1 more descriptor as an example. It's easy to paint out the pictures if you know what you're doing. And one better way to paint out the picture is through symbolism, through metaphor. I mean, look at any good story. Look at all the Disney Pixar movies. He's still here. All these Disney Pixar movies, they mean something deeper than what they're talking about. And when you use metaphors, symbolism, you can cross-contextually make a point. You can change someone's mind, someone's frame of reference without even talking about the issue. These are just slight little hypnotic techniques that we're kind of covering the surface layer. And these are what I do in my practice, and slight things, examples of what I teach people. Now everyone else here goes about writing, telling, producing stories in their own way. And I'd like to find out how they do it, and we can see what techniques are naturally hypnotic because they're not trained in hypnosis, but the things that really deep dive in and work are hypnotic in nature. So if you know what the hypnotic techniques are, you can use them to your advantage. And this man, I believe, is Timothy Chizmar.
Hey, that's me. I'm Tim Chizmar. Does this thing work? Can you all hear me? Yes. Excellent. Good for me, bad for you. No, good times. I am Tim Chizmar. I'm a writer, producer, ghostwriter, publisher. I work for First Comics News, Fangoria. I've written for Chicken Soup for the Soul, 2-time Amazon bestseller. Pales in comparison, I'm saying next to Hugh, Howey. Like, nothing I say about writing is going to be.
I haven't done most of what you just listed, so I'm over here feeling pretty small.
You will do it by the end of the day, Hugh. I co-wrote a book with Clive Barker that won a Bram Stoker Award. I do movies. My movie Hell's Coming For You is on Amazon, Tubi, all that. Film Threat said Chizmar is terrific. That's me. I'm that Chizmar. So I do a bunch of stuff in entertainment and Hollywood and whatnot, and I love Grant. I've been working with Grant and his father for a long time. So I'm happy to explore this process and see what it is that we do and how it can be applied to hypnotic language. So now I'm going to let everybody else introduce themselves.
I'm Hugh, and I have not won a Bram Stoker. You're like underselling yourself. That was an amazing list of accomplishments. Everybody should give Tim a round of applause. This is why we're all here. I've written a bunch of books. Some have been in the process of adaptation for a long time. Just finally had my first TV show come out called Silo. And so we know cliffhangers if you've seen the end of that first season. I apologize, you have to wait a whole year to see how that wraps up. I love this presentation. A lot of us absorb what makes for great hypnotic writing through reading great works, and rarely take the time to tease it apart and learn the craft. I think this is super critical, and people should dig into this even more. We can talk about that later as we go, but let's get to the rest of the panel.
Hello everybody, my name is Sinn. Bodhi. How are you all today? I am a pro wrestler. I'm actually, weirdly, to rewind a very, very long time ago, I was a comic book illustrator and writer, and I wrote this terribly silly, ridiculous cartoon in the late 90s that facilitated my first couple of years on the road as a pro wrestler, learning my craft as I would travel. It was called Fred the Possessed Flower. And I do not expect anybody to know what that is. But it did make its way around the world for a minute, and it did financially keep me alive for the first couple of years of my wrestling career. Since then, I've wrestled for just about every major company in pro wrestling, from WWE to Impact, AEW, New Japan, and I am a part-time coach at WWE, try to say that fast 5 times. And I've helped coach and help storytell many performers from the shadows. It's difficult to say, I train this guy or train that girl. I've had a hand in my paw prints are on a lot of different performers. And I pride myself on being a storyteller. And I was very fascinated by this topic because I look at the way I like to tell a story and the way I explain to wrestlers and students how to tell a story in hypnotic terms. One of my longtime friends did hypnosis from Las Vegas. It was always a very interesting field for me, and I think pro wrestling is a really wonderful way to sort of metaphorically paint on a canvas, pardon the pun intended, not intended, where you use things that you know about art and history and politics and life and so forth. So everything is fair game to essentially do what we all aspire to do, and that's put smiles on faces. With that, I will turn it over to my other colleague.
Real quick though,
Yes, sir.
Is it difficult to sit in front of a table like this and not want to throw it in fluid?
You know, Tim, yes.
I'll switch seats with him in a heartbeat.
No, you will not.
Would you guys like to see Tim get pile drive before this? So I will give you a hypnotic suggestion to that. Where are you all sitting right now? What are the things you are sitting in? Weapons. And again, I'm that's closer to the truth. For a pro wrestler, even and when I first met my hypnotic pal, a lot of magicians and so forth from Las Vegas, they would always ask me questions because a lot of the magicians were very introverted and shy, where the wrestlers were much more cavemanish and more, outgoing and what have you. And they said that the magicians really looked forward to watching the wrestling because the wrestlers knew where the fans sat. They do not sit in the chairs. They do not sit in the bleachers. They sit right there. You suspend your disbelief when you're watching Luke and Darth, Hulk and Piper, Techno Destructo. I don't know if he's really from outer space, but when I watch him, I believe it. So everybody sits there. When you're reading that book, they're essentially sitting right there. So whether you're drawing a comic, writing a book, pro wrestling, doing a rock concert, keep that in mind. While you're putting smiles on faces from the position, they're all sitting right there.
Who's this guy?
Who are you?
My name is Hunter Jackson, and I was a punk rock kid from Richmond, Virginia, and I hated Star Wars because I felt like Darth Vader was a ripoff of Dr. Doom, and all the coolest aspects of Star Wars were either taken from mythology or Jack Kirby. And it had a disco soundtrack. So I felt like I could make a better movie than Star Wars. But it sort of turned into a rock and roll show by accident. But a lot of what we did, or a lot of my role in GWAR, was the storyline, coming up with the weird, crazy story part of it. Like, for instance, I wanted to put a giant dinosaur in the show. So I thought it would be fun if we actually developed that story during the show. And we have GWAR find an egg, and it hatches and as a monster and like attacks the band on stage, you know? And then later on, there's a TV report that comes on to a video that says, oh my God, this giant monster is like invading Japan, you know? And then next thing you know, the giant dinosaur comes stomping on the stage. The other thing too was to try to communicate to the audience that GWAR was more than a band. And so I had our address put on stuff so that people, if you want more information about GWAR, write to this address. And that allowed me to start putting out a newsletter that each newsletter would be about a different character in the show and talk about the background and the whole backstory of it all. And so that helped to communicate. So it was all about trying to bring the crowd in and get them interested, teasing them, and getting them to come in and say, hey, there's more to this story. This is interesting. And I want to learn more about these weird characters. So that's my part as far as the hypnotism of the audience goes. Because our fan club newsletter was called Mind Control Monthly. Because the purpose of the newsletter was to make it so that people couldn't help but constantly think about GWAR. Hypnotism is very important.
I just want to fanboy for a second. I was in college 20 years ago when I saw you guys in concert, and it was one of the most memorable experiences of my entire life. And if you've never been to a GWAR concert, you're missing out. Like, it's insane. And don't wear any clothes that you care about, because they will get destroyed while you're there. But these guys are like living legends. It's just awesome to have them up here.
Got any GWAR fans here?
Consider hypnosis. Is it mind control? Get asked that, or am I going to start acting like a chicken? You know those questions that comes with the job, right? Why wouldn't it? Well, all hypnosis is literally direct, focused attention. So when you have your attention on that screen and you're watching a TV show, a movie, and the border, the frame around the screen kind of dissipates, you're within the show, and you feel the emotions that the characters feel. When you're on your phone and you're watching a YouTube video, or you're watching TikTok, and all of a sudden the night is gone and it's time to go to sleep, what happened to time? That's time distortion. Because you're in a trance. That's all hypnosis is direct focused attention. And so each of them have their own unique way to create direct focused attention on all of you, on all of their audience. And sometimes they do it with pacing and leading. They give you a little bit of the story, and then once you're hooked, once you're interested, once you're within their reality, their map of the world, their characters, you want a little more, subscribe to the newsletter that lead you into their world even more. Some of the best ways to create your stories through congruency, that's one of the best things you can do, is to be completely congruent. So if you're a live performer, just be yourself amped up a notch, because that's you. You can tell your story even better because it's personal. And if you can relate to it, other people can as well. And so Tim, we'll go down the line. Do you have any examples, any ways that you like to engage an audience, that you get their attention?
Sure, I take off all my clothes. When I don't do that,
Give me good ways.
got your attention, Hugh. Listen, I do, in the people that I work with, I try to remind them that they have more ability and power than they're giving themselves credit for. A lot of times, my clients are people who want to write a book, make a movie, make a comic book, and they put up these barriers that don't really exist except in their own minds. So they are stopping themselves from being able to do what they can do. And nobody would intellectually do that. Why would you stop yourself from doing something you want to do? But they've got this block. And so when I talk and I give seminars and stuff, I oftentimes open with this. So if you don't mind, Graham, I'm going to do this. I want everybody to please just play along. I want you to raise your hand as high as it'll go. Now look around, look at everybody. You heard what I said. Watch this. Raise it higher. I said raise it as high as you can go, and you could still go higher. You heard me the first time, but you didn't do it. That's my job. My job is getting people to raise it higher, because that'll get you where you want to go. Everybody's got these dreams and these things that they want to accomplish. Well, then why are you stopping yourself? So that's just a little example of what I do.
That reminds me of the most impactful panel I ever sat in on. It actually launched my entire writing career. I spent 20 years trying to write a book and couldn't get through it. And I was sitting in a panel just like you guys are at a book conference, and someone in the audience asked, I'm trying to write a book and I can't finish it. And one of the panelists had a very Tim Chizmar performance, and her name was Carolyn Todd. She writes with her son Charles Todd as a duo. And she looked at this woman and she slapped the table and she said, "You stop talking about writing a book. You stop telling your friends you're gonna write a book. You stop dreaming of writing a book and you sit down and write the book." And it was very much, you're the one getting in your way. And she was yelling at this lady, and I was sitting over there, but my hair was blown back. She was basically yelling at my 20 years of futility. And sometimes hypnosis can be soft, it can be lulling you into sleep, but it can also be standing on your chair and yelling at you. And I think the key to good, impactful storytelling, and these guys are good at yelling, is it's important. Like, you have to get people's attention, and you need to learn the ebb and flow of that. If you write a good book, there needs to be action sequences, and then there needs to be what they call the denouement, which is afterwards, where the character is thinking about what just happened, and then you need a little more action. And if you write all of one style, you'll lose your audience no matter what they're into. You have to have that ebb and flow. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate Carol and Todd yelling at me, even though it was like through her peripheral vision. But it got me writing, and hopefully this fired you up. And whatever you're stopping yourself from doing right now, we're going to hypnotize you into this is the end of that person, and the beginning of the person is going to get your shit done.
For me, I would like to say, as a live performer, but it does translate to the written word, is you have to really, you have to put yourself into that position, into the palm of your hand. You have to believe. And my trainer, Jake the Snake Roberts, I think he's here today. I'm going to go bug him.
Right in the pavilion, just right across the
Yeah, I literally drove from Death Valley to be here. I got here moments before I got here, so I will go and sneak up behind Jake after this. But Jake was a very somber, sneaky storyteller, and I'm reading this thing here. Please be, I know words, I can read some words. Please be aware that many members of your audience may be under 18 years of age. So, having said that, Jake the Snake explained emotional storytelling to me as masturbating people in motion. Get them where they need to get, however you need to get them there. Be shameless, be authentic, be passionate, be angry, be happy, but feel what output of emotion is required. Don't fake it. And the cliche is pro wrestlers and strippers are not far off. They're both selling lies and skimpy spandex. But we're portraying a character to generate money and to generate smiles on faces. So the thing is it has to be authentic. I can't just go to the mall, get face painted, and say I'm an evil clown. I have to be the guy. Whereas, Hunter, Techno, Destructo was talking about Darth Vader being an actor and being a ripoff or whatever. I'm a big Darth Vader fan. My favorite wrestling match of all time is Luke versus Darth. It's the big top villain and the intergalactic young country boy that's got to fight his way up through Hell's Half Acre across the
White meat babyface, yeah.
There you go. And to put it in wrestling jargon terms. And I'd rather talk in more open-ended terms for creativity. I don't need to use jargon terms to explain good guys and bad guys. There being a first act, a second act, a third act, and, introducing the character, putting the character into a heap of problems, and then having the character prevail. That's a wrestling match. That's a movie, that's a comic book, that's a story. So if you put those details of emotion that are required authentically into your story. When I see wrestlers in the locker room and they're memorizing things, I just shake my head. And I'm not an old school caveman per se. I'm very open-minded. I'm not old school and I'm new school. I'm Jeet Kune Do. I'm whatever works. I'm water. Water is malleable. There's one of those big words, hypnotic. It can whittle through the cracks, it can smash rock. You need to be versatile and know what you need for when you need it. If I was a good guy on any given night, which I don't change anything except where I put what to facilitate a hateful reaction or an empathetic reaction. So you have to understand credibility and sincerity. If people think you're faking it, they're going to be upset. Whether they know they're going to see a show, like you know Mel Gibson isn't Braveheart. You know James Earl Jones isn't Darth Vader. Just the same as William Smith. You know, there's a different story. Is he Jake the Snake? Is he not Jake the Snake? You know, so different people like this are sort of more as method actors. You force yourself to have to think and think, well, how would I feel? How would I do this on any given night if I'm wrestling with this guy or this girl or this guy or this guy? Well, what have they done to provocate my emotions? So I simply am a creature of reaction. Almost like I really enjoyed the Joker rendition from I always want to say Heath Slater, it's not Heath Slater.
Dark Knight or
Thank you, Freudian wrestling slip. You know, him saying, I don't know what I'd do if I caught him just chasing cars. You know, he needs Batman, he completes him. I need the good guy to make me the bad guy. I need the bad guy to make me the good guy. And if I'm wrestling a crappy good guy, it's harder to be hated when the good guy is kind of poopy. But if the good guy is on the money, man, it's easy to be hated and vice versa. So you have to juggle and weigh all of those isms. Why do you like Biden? Why do you like Trump? Why do you like Luke? Why do you like Darth? Why do you like the Avengers? Why do you like Thanos? There's an ecosystem of emotions, and you kind of have to put them on those scales and judge how it's going to unfold. So I will leave this as
I like that you love Darth Vader, but the best Joker is Mark Hamill. Isn't that interesting?
I'm a big fanboy for all of the Jokers for different reasons.
How does Luke become the Joker?
That's what that blew my mind.
It's just his voice.
So I did rock and roll for a while, and things sort of went sour between me and GWAR, and bad things happened, and I stopped doing it. But thanks to Sinn Bodhi, I discovered professional wrestling, and super fell in love with it because every time I go into the ring, I'm telling a story. And only about, maybe if I'm lucky, 10% of the crowd have ever seen me before or know who I am or what my character is about. So they're seeing me for the first time. They don't even know if I'm a good guy or a bad guy. And as soon as I get out there, I've got to start communicating to them. You know, and I switch around. Sometimes I'm a good guy, sometimes I'm a bad guy. And it's all about selling that story. Like when I get up in the ring, one thing that something that I swiped from Sinn Bodhi to get people interested. When I get up in the ring, sometimes I'll grab the rope and start smelling it. You know, and I'll act like an animal, you know, and I'll smell the rope.
You just call me a rope smeller?
I've seen it happen. And the lady in the front row, I heard her going, why is he smelling the rope? To get her to say that. To get her to wonder, why is he smelling the rope? I don't have to finish the story. I'll even, you know, it's all about bringing them in, getting them involved and interested and telling the story. And that's why I love wrestling so much. I have, like, my nephews are involved with the Catholic Church, and they direct these plays where, okay, everybody that shows up is going to have a part in the play, you know? And they're, like, take it really serious. And, you know, you'll have a couple of people that are really talented and really make the show awesome. And it kills them when I go, professional wrestling is the greatest thespian art form. And I believe that, you know? But man, it gets in the across. It is true. It's all about communicating and trying to bring the audience in.
Didn't you have a drama background at some point? Like, were you in plays and stuff when you were younger?
No, I've always just been an art form.
That's incredible, because like, as a storyteller, I'd love to know where you learned your storytelling craft.
Well, I grew up in a little house on a hill surrounded by a giant prison, and I started reading comic books. And I had 3 sisters, and so I didn't have anybody to. I've always like hidden and drawn my little stupid drawings and worked on gone in my room and my little hamster hidey hole and worked on my shit. You know, and so that's where it came from.
Amazing.
It's nice. Yeah, so everything we're doing up here can be seen as hypnotic in nature as well if you know what you're looking for. Like when I started off, I'm asking you questions. I'm asking, oh, are you ready for the panel? Are you having a good time? Now that's a hypnotic technique in itself as well. It's a yes set. You'll see that at stage hypnosis a lot to get them ready for the whole show. You ask them questions that the answers are going to be yes, and then it's followed up by a compliance test. Raise your hand. There's all sorts of various techniques that your normal everyday life happen to be hypnotic techniques. Even Tim Chizmar standing up and yelling at you is a hypnotic technique. It's a pattern interrupt because I don't know how many panels you've been to this weekend or plan on going to. I don't know how many of them are going to start standing and screaming at you. And also a shock induction because when something shocking happens, you're like, whoa, what's going on? And you're just looking for answers because you want to be confused and your subconscious mind just latches onto whatever they tell you. So this man is hypnotizing you by being loud and obnoxious and loving.
You know, I was called obnoxious so much in college, I looked it up. Like, at first I was like, hey, everybody, I'm obnoxious. I'm obnoxious. And then I looked it up, I was like, oh. It's a true story.
There's all these different techniques, and I want to know what you guys want to know. So I am going to ask you to either stand up or come just shout it out. But before we get there, is there anything anyone would like to share before we start taking questions?
Yes, I have things to talk about. Yes. First, I want to fanboy out because you did for GWAR. I wasn't going to, but I remember where I was the first time I read Wool. I remember where I was the first time I read iZombie. Your work is magical, and your success story of how you went from indie self-publishing to as huge a success as you are is so inspiring, and it inspires me. It made me a writer. So, thank you, Hugh.
I hypnotized him before the panel to say that. I didn't think it was going to work, but...
What did I just say?
You're doing great. You're doing great. Thank you, Tim.
And then, I wonder, so you mentioned the moment when you were at a writing event that stayed with you. Here's one that stayed with me. Maybe this will help you. Does anybody here want to write a book or a comic? Let me see. Yeah? Okay, now you're all raising this high as it'll go. We're on to you. I was at a conference, and they opened the conference by saying, I want you to take a moment and write down the one thing you don't want anyone to know about you. The one thing that you're going to take to your grave. And then there was just silence. And so oftentimes I stole it. I'll use it in lectures and stuff, but it gave me an opportunity to sit there and think in it, like, what is that thing? What is it? What's the thing?
Is that hypnotic?
Pattern interrupt, shock induction.
So for me, we're supposed to ignore it and just.
I acknowledged it.
Rick, does it mean anything?
Go on.
Oh, we're good? Okay, all right. So, it means the rest of GWAR is going to break through that wall, spray us in blood. So I wrote down something and I had to take it with me and stare with it. At the end of the conference, they said the thing that you wrote down is the thing that you have the most emotion about, so it needs to be in your art. It needs to be in your writing. So that made a huge impact on me, and hopefully, I don't know, maybe that did something for you. But yeah, so I wanted to mention that before we went on.
Anything else anyone else would like to share before the questions come in?
And if it's good enough, a buzzer will go off.
Let's get some questions. Everybody's waiting to hear their...
All right. So here's a passive double bind. You can either stand here and ask your question, or just raise your hand and shout it. Go for it.
Hey there. Question. How do you use hypnotic language to market and sell your products after you create them?
Yes! That's a great question.
Oh, I got this.
You got it? You don't know how to sell. I've seen you wrestle.
It's
a wrestling joke.
I sell t-shirts, brother, but we'll find out. But I promised you all a pile driver, didn't I?
Yeah.
Put a pin in that. Just say hello. These aren't fold-away chairs.
These would actually hurt.
Well, I will tell you on a side note, steel chairs do hurt. They're not actors dressed up as chairs. They are real. Same with the concrete, same with the ropes, same with the ground. So, to answer your question, if there is any wrestling fans at all out here, who is this? I'll do a little bit of an older one. Who's this?
Yeah.
So just with the gesture, you knew exactly who I was talking about. That's marketing. That's how to sell stuff. What colors do the Lakers wear? What color does the Hulk still wear?
Black and white.
Well, yeah, that's true. That is sort of true. Point being is easily marketed. Like again, Grant was saying about hearing things in repetition. You know, when you're driving and you're doing your errands and you're in Vegas, where I dwell, I hear this irritating lawyer thing, and I can't get it right, but I have the syllables in my head. Calls them and you hear these numbers to call because those ads are on the radio every 5 seconds, or you're in your hotel room and this real estate commercial comes up, or this Viagra commercial comes up, or this whatever comes up. Pardon the pun.
Comes up. All right, I got it.
But it's repetition, and as soon as you're in the market for that accountant or that realtor or that Viagra, you go, oh, I know, I'm going to call 977-0000. That's the repetition of marketing. There's nothing overly amazingly creative about it. It's picking something that is catchy, whether it's Hulkster's red and yellow or black and white, or the Lakers yellow and purple, or what have you, or some of this. Daniel Bryan made $1 million doing this, and everybody could just cheer along saying, yes. He didn't write Great Gatsby by doing this. He just used one of those small words that Grant was talking about and generated great success over it. So just think simple and think accurate.
If you're wondering how hypnosis plays in marketing, that's all marketing is. I recommend either talk to me, you can chat message me, or if you don't like me for whatever reason, you'd be wrong. Looking at neuro-linguistic programming, that is what every marketing person uses as hypnosis to get people to invest emotionally and take action. Or you can talk to me and I'll break it down into simple ways because that takes like years to learn. So
Can I tell a quick question? I promise it'll be quick because we'll go into another question. But as far as selling, when I first moved to Hollywood, I had a comfort zone. I had sold short stories, I had sold articles, and I had sold screenplays. What I had never done was sell a novel. And if you ask somebody, a layman writer who knows it in theory and reads Writer's Digest and things like that, they would tell you about how you need a query letter and you need to go after agents and you need to submit the first chapter and you need to I had a comfort zone. It was articles, short stories, screenplays. I did not say novels. Here's what I did to get something at the end of this. I went to a meeting of the Horror Writers Association, the Los Angeles chapter of the HWA. I went to it and I announced that I had a book I was working on because I didn't want to tell them that it was just an idea. And I told them about it, but I was confident and I was smiling and I was talking to everybody there and I told them about my idea. At the end of that meeting, I was approached by a small indie publishing house, and the woman offered me a book deal for the idea that I'd been working on. Remember, it was just an idea. So I took her business card, I put it in my pocket, and I said, thank you, I appreciate that, and I walked away. A couple of months later, about 3 months later, there was an event in LA called the Los Angeles Times Festival of Books. And if you've ever been to it, it's a big book festival. I was there with the HWA booth. That same publisher approached me, because I hadn't called her or anything, and she asked if she could talk to me. And I went aside with her, and she said, Tim, we know why you haven't reached out to us. A writer of your caliber, we insulted you by offering you a 1-book deal. We would now like to offer you a 3-book deal if you would please consider publishing with us. I'm not going to get up and yell. The point is, I hadn't written the book. So when people talk to me about agents and query letters and all this stuff that's old gatekeeping, it doesn't exist anymore. My neuro-linguistic programming, my hypnosis was believing in myself, being confident, being smiley, talking to them as a peer, not doing that, I'm an aspiring writer, one day I hope to. I went in there like a peer, and they believed that I was a peer, and I signed a 3-book deal as a peer. So I hope that helps about selling.
Add something to that, because this is a great question, and it really goes to a lot of what we're talking about. It's not just how do you find your voice, like how do you connect with the audience, both in your art and in your promotion. And I think you said authenticity, which is critical. If you go into this thinking that you have to do it by not using big words, that is one avenue. And if you try to get the biggest audience possible, maybe you'll go that way. But if you be yourself, you'll find there's a lot of other people out there like you. And that's what I love about these cons, is that we all feel unique, And then we come here and you're like, hey, we're unique in a very similar way. We have a lot of uniqueness that overlaps. And if you just write the story in your voice, the way that makes you happy, if you promote in your style the way you can, you're gonna find there's an audience out there. So don't try to be something you're not, don't try to appeal to everybody. Like, figure out who you are, write what's important to you, write it in your voice, when you write an email to a friend, and find your small market. Don't try to write a book that'll make 1 million people happy. Write a book that'll make one person feel like $1 million, and you'll have more success that way.
Let's do it, the hammer.
Oh, great. Just to kind of lead along those lines, a lot of people use their personal experiences for storytelling. Have any of you used that to incorporate that for dynamic storytelling?
Absolutely. If you draw on your good experiences, bad experiences, and everything, and your friends, your family, anything that you've seen, so to your point earlier, writing for one person, I was always of the mindset that I'm so traveled, I've seen so many different countries and brilliant cities and met so many wonderful people that I think I'm a harder sell than the average bear to entertain. So I'm very much in that Andy Kaufman mindset of, if it'll amuse me, it'll probably amuse the average bear. So then I don't start worrying about, well, are these people gonna like it? They gonna like it? They gonna like it? I just think, is it amusing to me? Is this gonna get me mad, sad, happy, whatever I need to do? And then we kind of go with that. For instance, when I was, so I'm a coach part-time for WWE. Before that, I was talented. As Tim said, we'll use that term loosely. Yeah, you can laugh, that's right. Just trying to put a spin on it. So as I'm knowing that I have to do a bunch of podcasts, interviews, and different things, and gone are the days of me just, or any wrestler being, on the radio saying, well, we'll come out this Friday, someday, and we're gonna, they don't want to hear that. They want to hear truth. But at the same time, if I was just to really just talk normal and be just a nice guy, and just, I don't know how riveting the character that you're buying a ticket to come see. So I thought, I've got to meet that somewhere in the middle. So I took real stories, real anecdotes for myself, and I just, as Stone Cold would say, it's me with the volume cranked. What did I do?
Right,
You said the magic word!
May I have your attention, please? There has been a fire emergency reported in the building. Please evacuate the building by the nearest exit.
I have a panel at 8 o'clock, so much for my panel.
You can find me at grandmekeys.com. I'll be doing silly things like this. I'll be helping people as well.
I'll see you outside.
I was just about to tell you what we're doing next.
Tonight we shut down Domico. Sorry guys, today.
Please evacuate the building by the nearest exit.
Amanda?